In the scorched cradle of North Africa, where the desert whispered secrets of ancient empires, a new colossus awoke. It was December 1942, and the Afrika Korps, Erwin Rommel's sun-bleached legion, rolled into Tunisia like ghosts from a Teutonic dream. But amid the panzers and half-tracks, one machine cast a shadow longer than the pyramids. They called it the Tiger I. Not just a tank, a titan. A 57-ton behemoth clad in 100mm frontal armor, thicker than a man's resolve in the face of hellfire. Its 88mm KWK-36 gun could punch through steel at 2 miles, turning Allied Shermans into smoldering coffins before the crews even knew death was coming. The Tiger didn't just fight battles, it devoured souls. Its first roar came at Gazala, where a single Tiger 131's predecessor in infamy, claimed dozens of British tanks in a single afternoon. Crews reported it shrugging off 75mm shells like rain on slate, advancing through minefields as if the earth itself bowed. One Tommy, a gunner from the 2nd Royal Tank Regiment, scribbled in his diary that night, "It's not a tank, lads, it's the devil's own chariot. Saw it today, black as sin, eyes glowing with that bloody long gun. Fired once and half our line vanished in fire. God help us if more come." Word spread faster than the Sirocco winds. From the bars of Cairo to the command tents of El Alamein, the Tiger became legend. Allied intelligence dismissed early sightings as Jerry tall tales, exaggerations from shell-shocked spotters. But then came the wrecks. Twisted hulks of Matildas and Valentines, their armor peeled back like tin cans, riddled with 88mm penetrations that spoke of impossible range and power. By January 1943, as Rommel's panzers clawed toward the Kasserine Pass, the fear took root. American GIs fresh from stateside training heard the stories around flickering campfires. "It don't stop for nothing," one doughboy muttered, poking at the embers. "Armor like a battleship, gun that reaches out and touches you from the next valley. One Tiger's worth a company of ours." The Tiger was Nazi Germany's masterpiece of intimidation. Designed by Henschel and Sohn in a frenzy of desperation after Barbarossa's bloody toll, it embodied the Führer's obsession with superiority. Adolf Hitler himself had demanded a tank that could smash through anything, ignoring the engineer's warnings of weight and cost. Ferdinand Porsche's prototypes had failed spectacularly, transmissions shearing like wet paper. But Henschel's design prevailed. First deployed in August 1942 near Leningrad, the Tigers tore through Soviet T-34s like wolves among sheep. But it was in Africa where the myth metastasized. The Schwere Panzerabteilung 501, Rommel's elite, arrived with just 3 operational Tigers in December. Yet in their debut at Taborba, they accounted for over 20 Allied kills. Crews whispered of the Ghost, a Tiger that vanished into dust storms only to reappear with biblical wrath. The radio said, "Red leader to command. Tiger sighted. Grid 4712. Engaging. Christ, it's shrugging us off. Armor impenetrable at 500 yards. Request air support, it's coming straight for us." Fear is a weapon sharper than any bayonet. The Tiger's reputation preceded it, a psychological barrage that broke spirits before tracks met tracks. In the Kasserine Pass disaster, February 1943, American M3 Lees and M4 Shermans, brave but outclassed, melted under the 88's fury. Over 100 Allied tanks lost in days, many to a handful of Tigers that prowled like lions among gazelles. Lieutenant Colonel William H. Wilbur, commanding the 1st Armored Division's Combat Command B, filed this report after the rout. "The German heavy tank is a formidable adversary. Its silhouette alone sows panic. Our 75mm guns glance off at extreme range. Only close assaults have any hope, and by then, it's too late." The men are calling it the Tiger and fearing it like the plague. Across the Mediterranean, the dread rippled to Europe. British intelligence in London pored over grainy reconnaissance photos from Malta, piecing together fragments. 11.8-liter Maybach engine, guzzling fuel like a dragon's thirst. Schmalturm cupola for the commander, offering godlike visibility. Tracks interleaved for soft sand, but prone to jams in the mud of Flanders. Reports from Dieppe, the ill-fated raid of 42, hinted at Tigers in trials, though none appeared. Still, the myth grew. In Cairo's smoky officers' clubs, maps were marked with red claws. Tiger sightings. "They're invincible," a South African major grumbled over gin, his hand shaking as he lit a cigarette. "Built like fortresses, crewed by supermen. If they push to Algiers." He trailed off, the unspoken horror hanging like cordite. A soldier said, "Dear Mum, the Jerrys have a new toy out here. Calls it the Tiger. Folks say it's unstoppable. Wish I had one on our side, but don't worry, we'll give 'em hell anyway. Love, Tommy." As spring teased the desert with reluctant green, the endgame unfolded. Operation Torch had turned the tide. Montgomery's 8th Army squeezed from the east, while Patton's Yanks hammered from the west. The Africa Corps, ragged and resupply-starved, fell back to the Mareth line, then the coastal plains. Tigers, once kings of the dune, now lumbered on fumes, their roars hoarse. Yet the legend persisted. In the Battle of Medellin, March 21st, Rommel's last offensive, a desperate lunge with 150 tanks, faltered against Allied air and artillery. But whispers persisted. The Tigers are holding the rear. Unbreakable. A New Zealand gunner, after pounding a distant shape with 25-pounders, wrote, "We hit it square. Smoke rose, but it kept coming. Like shooting at a mountain, lost 3 mates that day to its gun. It's not fair, this war." April arrived like a thief, stealing the Axis' last illusions. The Allies surged toward Tunis, the port city that promised escape or annihilation. Elements of the U.S. 1st Infantry Division and British 78th Division pushed through the Cap Bon Peninsula, flushing out rearguards. Airfields fell, supply dumps burned. The Tigers, down to fewer than a dozen operational in the 501st, became phantoms conserving fuel for the final stand. On the 20th, near the village of Gariat El Atach, a patrol from the 142nd Battalion, Royal Armored Corps, crested a ridge. Below, in a shallow depression fringed by twisted olive trees, lay the unexpected. No roar greeted them, no flash of muzzle. Just silence, heavy, expectant. Corporal Ellis, "Blimey, it's a Tiger, full kit, not a scratch, but quiet as the grave." They approached on bellies, Bren guns ready, expecting ambush. But the turret hatch yawned open, papers fluttering in the breeze, abandoned in haste. No bodies, no blood. Just the ghost of an engine's heat, and a fuel gauge needle kissing empty. The crew had slipped away under cover of night, not from shells or saboteurs, but from the war's cruel arithmetic. 860 liters of fuel exhausted, stranding their invincible steed. Word raced up the chain. By noon, sappers swarmed the site, rigging tow cables to a waiting Churchill recovery tank. Engineers marveled at the beast up close, the interleaved wheels caked in clay, the rubber-rimmed tracks still supple. Inside, they found shell casings, maps marked with frantic retreats, and a single logbook entry. 18 April. Fuel critical. Orders to hold at all costs, but costs we cannot pay. Abandoning position. Got mid-uns, but not the petrol. This was no shattered wreck, no trophy of Pyrrhic victory. This was Tiger 712, intact, operational, save for its thirst. Captured not by bayonet or bomb, but by neglect. The first unblemished specimen to fall into Allied hands. Intelligence officers buzzed like hornets. Jerry's secret, ours now. But deeper, in the guts of every man who touched it, stirred something rarer than triumph. Wonder. What secrets hid in those welds? What flaws lurked beneath the myth? For the first time, the Tiger was not a shadow on the dune, but steel in the sunlight. Vulnerable, human-scaled. The desert, ancient witness to pharaohs and Punic wars, held its breath. The legend, so carefully forged in fire and fear, began to crack. They feared the Tiger, until they captured one. In the shadow of Tunis's minarets, where the Axis dream died in a gasp of salt spray and surrender, the Allies claimed more than a city. They claimed a myth made manifest. Tiger 712, serial number etched like a curse on its turret side, sat inert in the grove. A 57-ton colossus felled not by shell or sabotage, but by the empty click of a fuel pump. Its crew, ghosts in the machine, had vanished into the hills, leaving behind maps stained with coffee rings and a log scrawled in hasty Gothic script. Treibstoff null. Rückzug unumgänglich. Fuel, 0. Retreat inevitable. But possession was one thing, possession across an ocean was another. This beast wasn't a trophy to parade through Cairo's boulevards. It was a puzzle, a prisoner of war demanding transport to the heart of Allied ingenuity. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. A voyage that would test chains, cranes, and the fragile egos of men who suddenly held destiny's blueprint in their grease-blackened hands. Major Whitaker. Lord Almighty. Look at this beast. Gun's a monster. 88mm bore, rifled for AP rounds that gut a Sherman at 2,000 yards. But the engine bay, cramped as a sardine tin. How'd they even fit a Maybach HL210 in there? Whitaker was no stranger to wrecks. He'd dissected Panzer IIIs in the Sicilian surf and puzzled over Italian semoventis in the Tunisian dust. But this was virgin territory, the first intact Tiger, unscarred by the surgeon's blade of battle. Word had rocketed up the chain. From Whitaker's radio man to Colonel George B. Jarrett at Ordnance HQ in Washington, a path paved with urgent cables and red-flagged memos. Jarrett, the quiet architect of America's captured weapons program, saw not just steel but salvation. Get it stateside, his directive crackled back. Every rivet counts. This ends the guessing. The recovery wasn't poetry. It was profanity-laced engineering. The Tiger's weight, 57 tons laden, heavier than 3 Shermans stacked, laughed at standard transporters. Sappers from the Royal Engineers jury-rigged a cradle from I-beams scavenged from a bombed-out Luftwaffe hangar, bolting it to a pair of M4 high-speed tractors nicknamed Dragons. Cables thick as wrists snaked from winches, biting into the hull with squeals of protesting metal. By midnight, the convoy rolled, a funeral procession for a legend, or perhaps its resurrection. Tiger 712 squatted on its trailer, turret locked rearward to balance the load, camouflage netting draped like a shroud. Jeeps flanked it, 50 cals manned against phantom counterattacks. The road to Tunis was a gauntlet, pockmarked by bombs, choked with refugees and routed Italians waving white flags. Axis stragglers, hollow-eyed and tattered Feldgrau, watched from ditches, murmuring Panzer V6 like a prayer betrayed. In the port, chaos reigned. Tunis harbor, a snarl of cranes and coaling ships brimmed with the detritus of victory. Captured U-boats listing at buoys, crates of 88mm ammunition stacked like cordwood. But the Tiger demanded its own berth. British Liberty ships, those ocean-going workhorses, were commandeered, their holds gutted for the prize. The SS Empire Javelin, a battered freighter fresh from Murmansk runs, won the lottery. Her master, Captain Elias Thorne, a grizzled Newfoundlander with a peg leg from Jutland, surveyed the beast with a squint. Captain Thorne, 57 tons, you say, my girl's rated for 40. We'll need every sling in the Med, and prayers from here to Gibraltar. One rogue wave, and she'll kiss Davy Jones with that iron bride of yours. Securing the beast took days. Ordnance techs, a cadre of MIT grads and Detroit gearheads, swarmed like ants, measuring clearances, sealing hatches against brine. They drained the residual fuel lines, a scant 20 liters of avgas, testament to the crew's desperation, and packed the transmission with cosmoline grease to fend off rust. Inside, they cataloged the leavings: a half-eaten sausage in waxed paper, a dog-eared Waldemar Erfurth novel on the loader's bench, and in the commander's cupola, a silver cigarette case engraved Fritz zu Stolberg, Ritterkreuz, 1942. Relics of men who believed in invincibility, until the gauge lied. Whitaker penned a dispatch that night, by lantern in his tent, the harbor's clamor a distant roar. Tiger 712 secured for sea. Condition, immaculate externally, internals pristine pending full audit. Crew effects suggest hasty evac, no sabotage noted. This specimen could rewrite the book on heavy armor. Godspeed to Aberdeen. Whitaker. The Empire Javelin slipped her moorings on May 1st, Tunis falling astern in a haze of smoke. Convoy KJ-52-24 merchantmen shepherded by HMS Milne and USS Moffett plowed into the Med, zigzagging against wolf packs. The Tiger rode low, decks awash in foul weather off Sicily. Crewmen lashed extra lines during watches, whispering of the kraut coffin that might drag them under if she broached. Below decks, in the hold's humid gloom, the beast slumbered. Seawater trickled through seams, pooling around the tracks. A stoker, Irish and superstitious, nailed a horseshoe to the bulkhead. For luck, lads. That thing's got the devil's luck written on it. But luck held. By May 15th, the convoy breasted the Atlantic swell, U-boat shadows fading with the spring equinox. Stateside loomed, the Chesapeake's gentle bays, a world away from desert mirages. Cables flew ahead, to Jarrett at the office of the Chief of Ordnance, to Brigadier General Everett R. Barnes at Aberdeen. Barnes, the iron-willed visionary who'd greenlit the T-34 evaluations in 42, paced his office, pipe clenched like a talisman. This Tiger, he barked to aides, is our Excalibur. Dissect it, ride it, break it if you must. But learn why Jerry fears it less than we do. Jarrett's team was a pantheon of precision. Metallurgists from Bethlehem Steel, ballistics men from Frankfurt Arsenal, Engine wizards poached from Packard. They'd cracked Soviet T-34 slopers and British Churchill rivets, but the Tiger promised poetry and steel, or so the myths insisted. Hargrove, fresh from Caltech, voiced the undercurrent in her lab notes. Anticipation borders on reverence. If this machine is half the terror its build, it'll redefine armored warfare. Yet something nags. A tank this grand, in a war of attrition? Hubris in tracks, perhaps. The ship docked at Newport News on May 28th, the Empire Javelin nosing into Virginia's haze like a weary pilgrim. Unloading was symphony and farce. Shipyard cranes, 200-ton brutes, lifted the Tiger in 2 stages, hull first, then turret crated separate as a dowry chest. Rail flat cars waited, reinforced with steel plate, the beast chained like Prometheus to its rock. A special train, the Tiger Express in shop whispers, chuffed north, through tobacco fields and mill towns, GIs lining the tracks for glimpses of the exotic foe. In Baltimore, a detour, customs inspectors wary of enemy contraband poked at the shell racks, 92 rounds of 88mm nestled in felt-lined bins. Loaded? One asked, sweating. Whitaker grinned. Not unless you fancy a fireworks show, friend. Cleared, the train rattled on, the Tiger's weight bowing rails, sending sparks into the dusk. Arrival at Aberdeen was revelation wrapped in routine. The experimental tank section, Shed 17, a vast barn of riveted iron, yawned open. Forklifts and gantry cranes orchestrated the unload, the Tiger settling onto concrete with a seismic thud that rattled coffee mugs. Jarrett was there, sleeves rolled, directing like a conductor. Secure the perimeter, he ordered. No civilians, this stays black till we know her guts. The team descended. Flashlights pierced the hatches, illuminating the 5-man crew layout. Commander in the cupola, gunner hunched at the Zeiss TZF-9B sight, loader wrestling 21-kilogram shells, driver peering through slits in the 50mm bow plate, radio op juggling the Fu-5 set. Hargrove climbed in, her slide rule clicking like castanets. Compartments tight, no room for error. Ventilation, marginal, overheat in a long engagement. Whitaker, fresh off the train, handed over his Tunis notes. Fuel log showing 500 liters burned in 80 kilometers, a thirst that scorched supply lines. She didn't die in battle, Colonel. She starved. Jarrett nodded, filing it away. But the awe held sway. This was German genius incarnate. Hydropneumatic suspension for a smooth ride over craters, electric turret traverse for silent aiming, armor sloped at 9 degrees on the nose to glance rounds. Preparations consumed weeks. Fuel, precious 100-octane avgas rationed from B-17 stocks, was siphoned in. Mechanics rebuilt the ZF AK-7-200 gearbox, a 7-forward brute prone to shears under load. Test tracks were groomed. The Y-track, a 5-mile loop of gravel and grass. The Mud Bowl, a quagmire to mimic Normandy's kiss. Barnes circled from D.C., his memos crisp. Full spectrum. Mobility, firepower, reliability. Compared to M4A3, no assumptions. In the mess hall, talk turned mythic. She'll outrun a greyhound, a mechanic joked. Punch through a bunker at 3 clicks. Hargrove, ever the skeptic, jotted in her diary by lamplight. The men idolize it already, like boys with a new bike. But engineering isn't faith. We'll weigh her, run her, tear her open. Truth hides in the tolerances. June dawned humid, the Chesapeake shimmering like molten lead. The Tiger, shrouded in tarps, waited in Shed 17, a sleeping dragon in America's forge. Engineers gathered at dawn, clipboards in hand, breaths held. Jarrett lit his pipe, the cherry glowing like a fuse. "Gentlemen, ladies," he said, voice cutting the hush. "Today we meet the monster." The starter motor whirred, a high whine building to a cough. Then life. The Maybach bellowed awake, a V-12 symphony shaking the rafters. Blue smoke belched from exhausts, the hull vibrating with raw power. Cheers erupted, fists pumping. For a moment, the myth reigned supreme, invincible, untamed. They thought they were about to study perfection. In the summer of 1943, as the world teetered on the razor's edge of invasion and attrition, a pilgrimage converged on Aberdeen. Not of pilgrims seeking grace, but of engineers chasing ghosts. Men and women armed with calipers, slide rules, and the unquenchable thirst of curiosity. Tiger 712 had crossed the Atlantic not as conqueror, but captive. A 57-ton enigma chained to flat cars, its hull etched with the salt of storms and the silence of abandonment. Now, in the heart of America's arsenal, it awaited judgment. Colonel George Jarrett stood at the threshold, pipe smoke curling like incense around his lined face. At 52, he'd seen the Great War's mud churn to the Second's mechanized frenzy, but this was scripture in steel. Gentlemen, he addressed the assembled 24 souls from Ordnance's elite. Metallurgists with ink-stained fingers, ballisticians nursing thermos flasks of black coffee, mechanics whose hands bore the stigmata of 1,000 rebuilds. We've feared this beast from afar. Today we look it in the eye, measure it, ride it, and if it bleeds data, we'll drain it dry. The tests began with reverence, as if approaching a relic unearthed from Teutonic soil. Phase 1. External Audit. Hargrove's team crawled the hull like archaeologists, ultrasonic gauges probing the 100mm frontal plate, homogeneous rolled steel, face hardened to Shrug's 75mm AP at 500 yards. Equivalent to 120mm vertical, she murmured, chalking figures on a notepad. Sloped at 9 degrees on the glacis, glances like a duck's back. Whitaker scaled the superstructure, peering into the Sharon-Fern Ruhr periscope ports. Vision slits narrow as suspicions, but the commander's SFL, ZF-1 cupola offered a 360-degree panorama, God's eye for the reaper within. Hale tackled the underbelly, the interleaved road wheels, 9 per bogey, 72 total, a Rube Goldberg of engineering. Rubber-rimmed for quiet, he grunted, spinning a hub. But mud, these'll clog like a bad drain. Early numbers dazzled. Ground pressure at 0.78 kg/centimeter, lighter than a Sherman despite the tonnage, thanks to 725mm wide tracks. The suspension? Torsion bars 16 to a side, flexed with oiled grace, promising a ride smoother than a Berlin boulevard. Awe held court through the first days. The gun, that L-56 barrel, 5.6 meters of rifled menace, was test-fired dry, breech cycling with hydraulic precision. Ballistics Chief Dr. Elias Roth loaded a dummy round, the Zeiss optics aligning ghost targets at 3,000 meters. Muzzle velocity 820 meters per second for tungsten core APCR, Roth calculated, smoke from his Chesterfield curling. Penetration 150 millimeters at 1,000 meters at 30 degrees. Our 76mm hypervelocity, laughable in comparison. Whispers rippled. No wonder Kasserine burned. By week's end, the internals beckoned. Hatches unsealed with protesting squeals, the 5-man womb revealed. Leather seats cracked from disuse, instrument panels festooned with Fu-7 wiring, a radio for Panzerwolves. The loader's rack gleamed with phantom shells, 92 rounds capacity from HE to the dreaded PZGR 3943. Hargrove slid into the gunner's seat, shoulders brushing the coaxial MG-34, her voice echoing hollow, cramped as a submariner's rack. 5 men in here, hours on end. Claustrophobia's the real killer. Whitaker, diary in hand, catalogued the human traces, a rusted razor on the command shelf, a faded photo of Bavarian Alps taped above the driver's tiller. Fritz's face, he thought, staring at peaks while dodging dunes. The engine bay, accessed via rear plates, was a V-12 Shrine. The HL-2A10 P-45, 11.8 liters displaced, twin magnetos sparking like captive lightning. 700 horsepower at 3,000 RPM, Hale reverenced, tracing fuel lines. Carbureted for avgas, same as our P-51s, but twin carbs, thirsty as a fish in gin. Life coursed through the veins of steel. On June 15th, under a sky bruised by thunderheads, Tiger 7 and 12 rolled forth, first time on American soil. The Y-track, a 5-mile oval of packed gravel, awaited. Jarrett in the commander's perch, Whitaker driving, Hale on instruments. Easy on the throttle, Jarrett cautioned, voice steady over the din. The clutch engaged, a lurch, then glide. Top speed hit 38 kilometers per hour on flats, the torsion bars soaking bumps like a luxury liner. Handles like a dream, Whitaker radioed, exhilaration cracking his drawl. No wonder the Tommies ran. Initial laps were triumph. Acceleration from 0 to 20 kilometers per hour in 12 seconds, turning radius tight as a fox's cunning. The 88 traversed silently, electric motor purring, 6 degrees per second. 0 backlash. Roth's range crew timed it, sighting to fire under 10 seconds. Sherman boys take 20 fumbling the hand crank. Data flowed like manna. Reliability seemed ironclad, the Maybach idling smooth at 600 RPM, exhaust a clean blue haze, but cracks spiderwebbed the idle. On lap 7, the first hiccup, a bogey pin chattered loose, the interleaved wheels binding with a metallic screech. Hale dove under mid-run, wrench flashing. Tolerance is too fine, he cursed, mud flecking his face. 1 grain of grit and it's a jam session. Jarrett noted it. Mobility penalty in off-road, high. Confusion crept in like fog off the Chesapeake. Phase 2, Endurance Trials. The auxiliary tank topped off, 160 liters of 100-octane, procured at premium from right field. The main 534-liter bladder brimmed, total nearly 700 liters, enough they hoped for a full day's run. The odometer reset, stopwatches clicked. Tigers 12 prowled the perimeter track, a 10-mile loop blending highway, cross-country, and simulated urban. First hour, bliss, 15 kilometers covered, engine temps steady at 80 degrees Celsius, oil pressure rock solid at 4 bar. Efficiency's a mythbuster, Roth logged. 0.5 liters per kilometers on roads, better than a Panther. But as the sun climbed, thirst asserted. By hour 3, 40 kilometers, the gauge dipped a quarter. Whitaker pushed across country, undulating fields, fences breached with casual disdain. The 88 barked blanks at hay bale targets, recoil a thunderous handshake. Hour 5, 65 kilometers, a stutter, fuel pump whining, carbs starving, halt. Inspection revealed vapor lock in the lines, heat soak from the V12 baking the tanks. Bypass patched, run resumed. But the numbers whispered heresy. Projected range, 195 kilometers road, 100 cross-country. For a beast meant to spearhead blitzes, it was a hobble. Rommel's panzers crawled on less, Jarrett mused, brow furrowed. How many tigers sat idle while Shermans flanked? By mid-July, the autopsy deepened. Firepower trials on range 6, the 88 lived up to infamy. Concrete bunkers, 2 meters thick, shattered at 2,500 meters, fragments raining like judgment. Penetration boards, layered steel and pine, wept oil from PSGR-40 impacts, 200 millimeters at 100 meters, tapering to 120 millimeters at 2 kilometers. Unyielding, Roth conceded but added the barb. Reloading? 7 seconds average, but in combat, sweat-slick hands, brass flying double that. An ammo weight, each shell 10 kilograms. Loaders a weightlifter with a death wish. Armor assessment yielded awe anew. Torso plates, 80 millimeter sides, deflected 105 millimeter howitzer fragments at 100 meters. The turret front, 100 millimeters, laughed at 50 cal enfilade. But vulnerabilities glinted. Roof plates 25 millimeters, hatches 40 millimeter, sniper's delight from above. And the rear, 80 millimeter engine deck, but sloped poorly, inviting bazooka kisses. Hargrove's ultrasound mapped welds, face hardened yes, but brittle core, brittle as the regime that birthed it. Mobility's unraveling accelerated. A 50-mile endurance haul on the hill climb circuit, undulating terrain mocking the Ardennes, exposed the Achilles. The Maybach strained, temps climbing to 105 degrees Celsius, coolant boiling in the radiator. Clutch slips at gradients over 30 degrees. Weight distribution forward heavy, Whitaker noted. Snout down in soft ground, belly flops like a drunk. Fuel? The killer. By mile 40, the tanks gasped empty. 520 liters consumed, averaging 1.05 liters per mile off-road. A Sherman, for contrast, sipped 0.6. Interleaved wheels, that engineering flourish, proved Faustian. In the quagmire pit, a man-made morass of clay and water, the nest trapped debris like a sieve inverted. Disassembly? 4 hours per side, bogies unbolted, wheels pried like teeth from a jaw. Maintenance nightmare, Hale reported, hands raw. In the field, Jerry loses a day per cleanup. No wonder so many tigers ghosted the line. Engine teardowns whispered of hubris. The Maybach, aviation-derived, finicky as a diva, demanded double filters for desert dust, yet clogged regardless. Compression tests, peaks at 7.1, but uneven cylinders betrayed rushed assembly. Brilliance, Jarrett admitted in his log, but brittle. One seized piston, and she's a 57-ton anchor. Fuel system's irony burned brightest. Twin pumps for reliability, yet lines routed through hot zones prone to vaporization. A mock run on low octane, simulating Jerry's dilutions, yielded knock and misfire. 100 octane or bust, Roth quipped. And bust they did, when synthetics faltered. Hargrove's synthesis report, typed on onion skin under a gooseneck lamp, captured the pivot. Initial metrics inspire, firepower unmatchable, protection peerless. Yet aggregate reveals folly. Mobility curtailed by mass, endurance eroded by excess. The Tiger dominates the duel but deserts the campaign. Awe yields to arithmetic and arithmetic indicts. August heat baked the grounds, but the tests turned cold. Reliability runs, 100 miles continuous, ended in catastrophe. Gearbox stripped on lap 12, synchromesh teeth sheared like glass. ZF-AK-7-200, robust on paper, fragile under load, Hale dissected, gears laid out like battlefield dead. Crew ergonomics fared worse. Mock engagements, volunteers crammed for hours, emerge pale, cursing the heat trap, ventilation baffles inadequate, CO buildup from the MG a silent assassin. Fuel's phantom haunted every datum. A logistics sim, hypothetical Panzer Kiel advancing 50 kilometers. Tiger burn, 100 liters per hour at cruise. For a battalion? Tons daily, Whitaker extrapolated. Jerry's trucks, strafed to hell, can't feed it. Diaries from Tunis, cross-referenced, confirmed. 501st Abteilung logs showed Tiger's operational 30% at best, the rest fuel-fasted hulks. Jarrett's nightly briefs grew terse. It's a sledgehammer and a scalpel war, he told the team. Maps of Tunisia pinned behind, red arrows of advance, halted by empty tanks. Confusion reigned, not doubt, but the delicious vertigo of demystification. The Tiger wasn't invincible. It was indulgent. A masterpiece marred by mania, its roar a hollow boast against the war's grinding wheel. Brilliance had a price, and it came in gallons. By the sweltering forge of Aberdeen, the Tiger's secrets bled onto paper. Gallons tallied, gears ground to nubs, myths measured in micrometers. But truth, like shrapnel, doesn't confine itself to labs. It ricochets across oceans, embedding in the flesh of the front. While Colonel Jarrett's reports yellowed on oak desks in Washington, the battlefields of Europe whispered corroboration. Frontline dispatches, captured ledgers, the ink-stained confessions of men who crewed the beast and watched it wither. In the summer of '44, as the Allies clawed from Normandy's beaches toward the heart of the Reich, the Tiger's legend met its mirror. Not in sterile test pits, but in the blood-soaked quagmires where strategy choked on reality. Here the data wasn't abstract. It was abandonment, ammunition racked and useless, hulls intact but hollow. The Tiger, that armored apparition of Aryan engineering, revealed its frailty not in explosion but in exhaustion. And in the pages of German diaries, those private requiems for a lost war, the lab's revelations found their human echo. The Normandy campaign was the Tiger's crucible, a hedgerow hell where mobility meant survival, and the beast's brilliance buckled under Bocage's bite. Deployed in penny packets, the 101st SS Heavy Battalion, with a dozen operational, the 502nd scraping by with 8, the Tigers tore into Allied columns with biblical fury. At Villers-Bocage on June 13th, SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann's lone Tiger rampaged through the British 7th Armoured, claiming 14 tanks and 15 transports in an hour, his 88 barking death from Orchard's shade. Crews hailed it as vindication, armor deflecting 17-pounder fire at 800 meters, tracks pulverizing stone walls like chalk. But victory's afterglow soured swift. Wittmann's escape, a narrow dodge through minefields, burned 120 liters in 20 kilometers, stranding his wingman in a ditch, engine seized from overrev. Becker, in his own log that night, scratched under lantern light in a ruined farmhouse. Wittmann's Tiger, a god among Shermans, but the fuel Bowser never came. 007 at half strength, pumps cavitate on fumes. Tomorrow's advance? A prayer. The Ober says push. But the tank says starve. Gut. Why build such thirst into invincibility? Dispatches from the front flooded Allied signals intelligence, ultra decrypts peeling back the Wehrmacht's veil. At Bletchley Park, codebreakers sifted Enigma traffic. Panzer Group West requisitions for Sonderkraftfahrzeug 181, the Tiger's euphemism, ballooned to 500 tons monthly for fuel alone, while rail lines choked under strafing typhoons. A July 10th intercept from the 12th SS Panzer Division. Heavy elements immobile. Treibstoff deficit 70%. Request airlift or abandonment authorization. British G2 analysts cross-referenced with Aberdeen prelims. Jarrett's fuel curves matched the math. 6 gallons per mile off-road, a voracious maw devouring Germany's dwindling reserves. On the ground, the truth etched itself in rusting hulks. Near Carpiquet Airfield, the Royal Winnipeg Rifles overran a liger of 3 Tigers, engines cold, hatches flung, crews fled on foot. Inside, Lieutenant Tom Riley, a Saskatoon boy turned sapper, found racks burning, 80 rounds per gun from HE to the tungsten-scarce APCR. But fuel caps mocked, dry as bone, sumps scraped clean. Riley's report smudged with Normandy clay, winged to chafe. Enemy heavies abandoned intact. No battle damage, apparent fuel exhaustion, ammo load full. Ironic gift. Suggest exploitation for intel. The bogeyman starves. The pattern proliferated like weeds in the rain. Operation Goodwood, July 18th, Montgomery's hammer blow with 1,000 tanks, flushed the 503rd Heavy Battalion from their leashes near Borgebus Ridge. British Typhoons pounced, rockets stitching the earth, but it was thirst, not fire, that felled the Pride. Hauptmann Rolf von Lux after action, captured in a satchel at midnight raid. Tigers engaged at 1,500 meters, 6 Cromwells brewed, 2 Fireflies gutted. But retreat order at 1600, fuel convoy interdicted by Jabos, 004 and 006 left behind, turrets traversed rear for defense. Cruise to half-tracks. Shame burns hotter than 88's flash. These machines could end the invasion, if only they could move. Von Lux's words echoed Aberdeen's quagmire logs. Interleaved wheels clogged with bocage clay, each clean up a half-day's labor, burning more fuel to stand still. British recovery teams, emboldened, towed 2 specimens to Portsmouth, twins to 712, destined for the same dissection. Inside one, a gunner's diary fluttered loose. Day 47, pushed 12 kilometers from Falaise, shells plenty, petrol nil. Heard the Tommies laughing as we walked away. The Tiger, our steel heart, coughs like a consumptive. Engineers warned Henschel in 42, too heavy, too hungry. Berlin called it genius. Now, grave marker. Across the Channel, the Italian front sang the same dirge. In the Apennines, the 504th Heavy Detachment, Tigers shipped overland from the Po Valley, prowled Monte Cassino's flanks. But mountain roads, serpentine and steep, amplified the curse. Lieutenant Erich Stahl, commander of Tiger 312, filled his Feldpost book with mounting despair. June 15. Ambush on Route 6, 3 M10s at 2 kilometers. 1 kill, 2 runs. Armor holds, gun sings. But climb to elevation burned 80 liters. Pumps strain at altitude, carves ice over. Tomorrow's patrol? Static defense. The beast weighs us down like sin. Stahl's battalion, promised as Monte Cassino's hammer, idled in olive groves, engines cold to conserve drops. Allied artillery, 155s from Anzio, ranged them at leisure, but it was the New Zealand 2nd Division's patrols that found the leavings. Tigers nosed into ditches, fuel caps pried open in vain salvage. A Kiwi sergeant in his billet that night. Jerry's monster, full of bang, but bugger all juice. Left it for the crows. Our lads'll have it crated for Blighty. Turns out the big cat's got no 9 lives, just a leaky bladder. The diaries multiplied in Allied hands, windfalls from surrendering Unteroffiziers, satchels stripped from the dead. At Ortona in 43, a Canadian rifleman uncovered Lieutenant Hans Weber's journal. Tigers to Africa Corps, 501st. Debut at Taberba, glory. But by El Agela, half the Abteilung ghosts. Fuel from Tripoli, stolen by Luftwaffe. Abandoned 131 intact, shame. It fought like lions, starved like dogs. Henschel's folly, built for Valhalla, not logistics. Weber's words bridged continents, syncing with Whitaker's Tunis notes. That Olive Grove Phantom 712 wasn't anomaly, it was archetype. German engineers, silenced by Speer's production zeal, had protested in memos now dust. Schwerer Panzer unsustainable consumption, recommend Panther up armor. But Hitler's directive, superiority at all costs, drowned dissent in adulation. The Ardennes, winter 44, Hitler's last gamble, walked am Rhein, sealed the indictment. The 506th Heavy Battalion, refitted with late-model 88L-71 upguns, spearheaded through snow-cloaked pines. Initial surges stunned. At Losheim Gap, Tigers brewed bazooka-armed GIs, armor shrugging 76mm Shermans like slaps. But the bulge's bite was fuel-deep. Oberleutnant Otto Skorzeny, the glider commando turned Panzer Whisperer, confessed in captured orders, to the Tiger, king of the kill, pauper of the push. The front's chorus confirmed what Aberdeen unearthed, not flaws in steel, but in the dream that forged it. The Tiger stood indestructible in myth but mortal in motion, a colossus clay-footed by its own excess. And in those abandoned hulls, full of thunder unspoken, the war's moral etched itself. Power untethered from provision is but a pyre waiting. The Tiger was indestructible until it ran out of breath. In the shadow of the Tiger's unraveling, Aberdeen's ledgers and the front's fallen idols laying bare the beast's Achilles' thirst, a transformation stirred. No longer was the Tiger a specter to evade, a duel to dread. It became a puzzle solved, a foe reimagined. Not an unbreakable fortress, but a glutton in a famine, a sprinter chained to a war of marathons. Allied tacticians, feasting on Jarrett's report number 17 and the diary's damning chorus, alchemized revelation into rifle. Strategies born not of bigger guns, but brighter minds. This was the pivot from panic to precision. the death of dread scripted in training yards and celluloid reels. From the proving grounds of Maryland to the tank schools of Bovington and Fort Knox, the truth cascaded like a clarion. The tiger could be tamed not by direct assault, but by denial. Make it move. Make it burn. Let its own magnificence be the millstone. The Allies didn't seek to slay the dragon, they sought to starve it, turning its roar into a rasp, its advance into an epitaph. The cascade began in August 44 as the Siegfried Line loomed and the Rhine beckoned. Jarrett's tome, 200 pages of charts, cross-sections, and cold calculus, winged to commands via diplomatic pouch. To Patton's Third Army in the mud of Lorraine, to Clark's Fifth in Italy's crags, to the Soviets via Arctic convoy whispers. Brigadier General Barnes, Jarrett's iron patron, penned the cover dispatch. The tiger is no myth, but neither is its mortality. Firepower peerless, endurance pathetic. Doctrine shift, harassment over head-on, flank, feint, fade. Its fuel is finite, ours is the field. At Camp Polk, Louisiana, the U.S. Armored Forces' beating heart, instructors pored over the appendices like Holy Writ. Colonel Harlan Whitaker, recalled from Aberdeen, stood before a phalanx of Sherman commanders. 200 olive-drab souls, helmets at attention, faces shadowed by the drill shed's tin roof. Behind him, a scale mock-up of Tiger 712, plywood and pipe, 110 glory, squatted under floodlights. Colonel Whitaker, steady as a compass. Gentlemen, you've heard the tales. The 88 that reaches out and touches you, armor that laughs at our 75s. But here's the hook. That monster guzzles 6 gallons to the mile in a scrap. Range? 50 miles cross-country, tops, before it's a pillbox on tracks. Your orders? Don't slug it out, dance it dry. Manuals bloomed like wildflowers in the doctrinal spring. The U.S. War Department's FM 1710, Armored Force Field Manual, revised overnight, appended a chapter, Countermeasures versus German Heavy Tanks. Pages crisp with insets. Tiger schematics annotated with Aberdeen's barbs. Vulnerable to flank speed. Induce pursuit to exhaust fuel reserves. British pamphlets from the School of Tank Technology at Bovington echoed, the Bosch Tiger, a study in overreach. Cartoons of portly panzers puffing like locomotives, captions quipping, chased its tail and ran out of tea. Soviet counterparts via Lend-Lease leaks adapted swift. The Red Army's T-34-85 crews received addenda to their tank combat instructions. Niemiecki Tiger, Kormit ego puteshestvium. Feed the German Tiger a journey. Tacticians in Stavka war rooms, puffing Bellamore canals, sketched feints on vast tables, IS-2 heavies to pin, T-34 swarms to harry, forcing tigers into chases that bled them white. But words on paper were whispers. Celluloid was the thunder. Training films, those grainy reels of morale magic, weaponized the wisdom. At Fort Knox, the Signal Corps film unit cranked out Tiger Trap, a 20-minute opus starring a captured mock-up and earnest GIs. Directed by Major Ellis Buck Harlan, a Hollywood refugee with a knack for grit, it opened on Kasserine's Ghosts, archival of burning Shermans, narrated Grimm. The films proliferated. British Don't Tango with Tigers, droll as a Ealing comedy, with actors in Feldgrau accents mangling lines for laughs. Ach mein Fuel, I chase, but I pant. Canadian productions for the 1st Armored, shot in Petawawa's Pines. Outrun the Beast, emphasizing the interleaved curse. Mud her up, boys, those wheels'll jam like a bad date. RF briefings incorporated clips, mosquito pilots tasked with tiger tagging, low strafes to spook pursuits, burning Bowser trucks in the bargain. In the field, the shift sang. Patton's Third Army, grinding toward Metz, issued tiger tips, mimeographed sheets pinned in every tank. 1. Spot at 2 kilometers. 2. Smoke and scoot. 3. Report position. Arty'll sing it to sleep. At the Battle of Aricourt, September 1944, Lorraine's foggy killing ground, the 4th Armored Division lived it. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams Shermans, wise to the word, danced rings around the 111th Panzer Brigade's Tigers. Feint east, fire west, a 76mm grazes a glacis, Tiger pivots, half a gallon burned in the turn. Pursuit through orchards, Abrams' column fading like smoke. Radio traffic crackles. Red one to all cats, he's hooked. Let him chase, 2 miles out, fuels his noose. The Tiger commander Hauptmann Hans von der Heide logs the lunacy. Enemy tactics altered, no charges, only jabs. Pushed 8 kilometers in pursuit, tanks at quarter, withdrawal forced. American ghosts. By dusk, 3 Tigers lager exhausted, crews foraging for ersatz, while Abrams brews coffee, his 75s unscratched. Italy's anvil rang the refrain. At the Gothic line, Clark's Yanks and Kiwis, briefed via Aberdeen echoes, turned Tigers into targets of temptation. The 508th Heavy Battalion, clinging to Apennine crests, lunged at baited hooks. M10 Wolverines feigning flank, drawing pursuits down switchbacks, where fuel burned double. Major Lila Hargrove, now field liaison, her slide rule holstered like a sidearm, advised from a forward OP, force the climb. Gravity's your gunner, every meter up, a litter down. A New Zealand sergeant, in his after-action, Tiger poked its nose at San Marino. We danced, Firefly fired wide, pulled back, Bastard chased 5 kilometers over scree. Ground to halt at our wire, crew bailed like rats. Full of shells, empty of spite, cheers to the boffins turned terror to target practice. Even the Luftwaffe felt the ripple. Recon Ju-88s reported Tiger laggers swelling, static defenses, not spearheads. Goering's flyers fuel-pinched themselves, prioritized Bowser runs over bombs, only to meet P-47 packs primed by the intel loop. Back stateside, the doctrine deepened. At the Armored School, Tiger Weeks, immersive sims with live-fire chases on the maneuver area. Cadets in M4s, instructors barking, predict the burn. At 20 mph pursuit, what's the window? Answers chorused, 10 miles, sir, then it's ours. Films evolved, the Thirsty Tiger series, narrated by Jimmy Stewart's drawl, blending humor with hard fact. Cartoons of tigers at pumps, begging, ein bisschen mehr bitte, while Shermans sip from streams. The Soviets, ever pragmatic, distilled it to brutality. At the Kubinka Proving Ground, T-34 vets dissected a captured tiger, Aberdeen's twin, shipped via Murmansk. Marshal Zhukov's directive, not to fight the heavy, to flee it into fatigue. Partisan manuals, airdrop to Baltic cells, sabotage fuel dumps, mine roads to force detours. In the Vistula Oder push, January 45, red columns baited Tigers of the 503rd into snow-choked flanks. IS-2's thunder passed, Su-85's nip heels, drawing chases that froze engines and frames alike. A Soviet gunner, Ivan Petrov, in his journal, The Fascist Tiger, big teeth, no legs for winter. We run circles, it pants, stops. Crews surrender with hands up, tanks full of hate but no heat. Aberdeen's gift turned their monster to our mouse. Psyops amplified the alchemy. Leaflets over the Ruhr, in crisp Gothic. Tiger Kameraden, Euer Panzer trinkt mehr als ein Bataillon. Warum sterben für Durst? Tiger comrades, your tank drinks more than a battalion. Why die for thirst? PO interrogations yielded dividends. Crews demoralized, whispering of the American curse, tanks that betrayed before bullets. By spring 45, the counterstroke crested. In the Ruhr pocket, where Model's Army Group B crumbled, Tigers, down to dozens operational, chased phantoms across the Rhine meadows. British 11th Armored, versed in the vid, feinted with comets, drawing pursuits that guttered in the Eder Valley. A Tommy gunner post-battle saw 3 heavies grind to halt, fuel caps dry as our gin. Crews walked in, white flags up, no shots fired, just the sound of silence, their engines quitting like whipped dogs. The transformation was total. From cowering convoys to confident carousels. Casualties plummeted, Tiger kills dropped 60% post-doctrine, per chafe tallies. Crews, once scripting last letters at the sight of that silhouette, now joked in the breach. Here, kitty, kitty, chase the laser. Jarrett, back at Aberdeen, reviewed the field returns with a rare grin. We didn't arm them better. We wised them up. The Tiger's cage, its own tank. Hargrove, in a letter home from the Elbe, the beast that broke us now breaks itself. Truth isn't a weapon, it's the whetstone, and we've honed our edge sharp. As the Elbe swelled and Berlin burned, the Allies rolled not in revenge but in rhythm, unhurried, unharried. The Tiger, that once unassailable icon, became Exhibit A in the case against illusion. A machine mastered by movement, felled by its fidelity to excess. The war's wheel turned not on thunderclaps, but on the tick of odometers. And the Allies held the map. They didn't have to kill the Tiger, they just had to let it move. June 6, 1944. D-Day. The world held its breath as the greatest armada in history disgorged its fury upon Hitler's Atlantic Wall. But beyond the bloodied sands of Omaha and the hedgerow inferno of Sword Beach, a quieter revolution brewed. Not in the clash of steel on steel, but in the spaces between. The pauses where engines idled, the feints that drew beasts from their lairs, the calculated retreats that turned predators into prey. The Tiger's myth, that ironclad illusion of invincibility, had been pierced at Aberdeen and echoed in diaries from the dust. Now, in the crucible of Normandy, it shattered on the anvil of attrition. This was the turning. From the choked lanes of Saône to the frozen forests of the Ardennes, the Allies wielded not just tanks and guns, but the hard-won heresy of Jarrett's reports. The truth that the Tiger's roar was a bluff, its stride a sprint toward self-strangulation. No longer did crews flinch at the silhouette. They lured it, laughed at it, left it to wither on muddy roads lined with the empty husks of its kin. The myth died not in blaze of glory, but in the whimper of fuel pumps run dry, a testament that even the mightiest machine crumbles when divorced from the mundane mercy of supply. Normandy was no fair fight. It was a farce scripted by fuel logs and feigned retreats. The Schwerer Panzerabteilung 503, Hitler's heavy fist for the invasion, 45 Tigers strong on paper, arrived piecemeal, rail-shuttled from the Eastern Front, amid Allied bombs that turned sidings to slag. By June 12th, when they clashed with the British 7th Armoured near Villers-Bocage, operational strength hovered at 12 machines, the rest marooned in depots, thirsting for tankers that never came. Whitman's rampage that morning, a solo Tiger claiming a dozen Allied wrecks, was the last gasp of legend, a Pyrrhic poetry that masked the hemorrhage. In the aftermath, as smoke curled from Cromwell hulks, British recovery teams, versed in Bovington's Tiger tips, prowled the orchards. They found Whitman's wingmen, 2 Tigers, tracks mired in bomb craters, engines cold. Fuel tanks, scraped bare, sumps echoing hollow. A sapper from the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, Corporal Jem Hargreaves, pried open a hatch. Racks heavy with Pisgah 40 tungsten rounds, optics pristine, but the Maybach's carves caked in varnish from idled overuse. Hargreaves' field note, smudged with apple clay. Enemy heavy, abandoned, no damage. Fuel exhaustion post-engagement. Ammo 85%, confirms Aberdeen, burns like a bonfire in a breeze. Sent cords for lift, another for the boffins. The hedgerows became the Tiger's tomb, a verdant vice that amplified every flaw Aberdeen unearthed. Interleaved wheels, marvel in the desert, turned to traps in Normandy's loam. Clay packed the nests, bogies seized, each extraction a half-day's dig with entrenching tools and curses. Operation Perch, Montgomery's thrust to Caen, drew the 503rd into a deadly pas de deux. Feints by the 50th Division, M4s probing, then peeling away, lured Tigers from cover, forcing countermarches that scorched litters per kilometer. By June 25th, battalion logs, captured in a Falaise farmhouse, wept logistics. Tiger 00409, fuel deficit 200%. Static at Hill 112. Jabot strafe approaches, advance impossible. Oberst demands assault, but assault without motion is suicide. Losses not to enemy, but emptiness. Allied air, Typhoons with 60-pound rockets, pounced on the paralysis. Wing Commander Roland Beaumont, leading 609 Squadron, tallied the toll. Spotted heavies lagered, engines cold. No AA fire, fuel too precious for gensets. 4 wrecks in 1 pass. The big cats don't roar, they rust. Ground crews emboldened flanked the hulks, bazookas kissing rear plates at 200 yards where the 80mm engine deck crumpled like foil. No duel, just dispatch. As July bled into Goodwood, Montgomery's 1,000-tank thunderclap, the tide surged. The 12th SS Panzer fed Tigers piecemeal, but doctrine doomed them. British crocodile flamethrowers herded pursuits into kill zones, while Typhoons cab-ranked overhead, waiting for the signal. Heavy moving. Vector. A single chase, 5 kilometers through Bourguebus wheat, could empty tanks. 300 liters evaporated, leaving ghosts for the reapers. Guards Armored Division after action. Enemy heavies engaged per FM 1710 addendum. Induced mobility. 3 Tigers pursued, expended fuel in fruitless advance. Overrun by infantry. Crews surrendered. 0 losses to us. The Aberdeen Gospel. Pure gold. By August, the Falaise Pocket, that 20-mile charnel of defeat, became the myth's mausoleum. Models Panzers, including 30-odd Tigers from the 101st and 102nd, attempted breakout, a desperate dash through the pocket of death where Canadian, Polish, and American lines converged like jaws. But the roads, cratered, choked, strafed, were no highways for heavies. Feints by the 1st Canadian Armoured, Shermans probing gaps, then withdrawing, drew the beasts into the maw. Hauptmann Eric Stahl, commanding a 503rd Remnant, scrawled in his final dispatch, Breakout attempt. Tigers lead, but lanes mined. Skies owned by Jabos. Pushed 7 kilometers, fuel exhausted. 312 and 315 left as roadblocks, scuttled half-heartedly. Cruised to the fields. The Tiger, once our thunder, now our tombstone. Allied eyes, from mulberry drones to Piper Cubs, tracked the hemorrhage. General Harry Crerar's 1st Canadian Army orchestrated the noose. Arty barrages to pin, airstrikes on Bowser 2s, ground swarms to Harry flanks. Tigers burned fuel in futile fits, a single evasion maneuver costing 50 liters, stranding them amid the 50,000 Axis dead and captured. Recovery tallies: 17 Tigers intact, towed to Portsmouth for the scrap heap of secrets. A Polish lancer, scouting the pocket's guts, saw them, kings in the mud, guns silent, abandoned like broken toys. One had a crew photo taped inside, smiling faces, now ghosts, war's cruel joke. Autumn deepened the dirge, the Siegfried Line a graveyard of good intentions. As Patton's Third Army hammered Metz and Bradley's 12th Group feinted toward Aachen, Tigers, survivors from the 506th and 507th, guarded the West Wall's pillboxes. But static was stagnation. Engines run hourly to fend off rust, each idle guzzling 20 liters. Doctrine's disciples pounced, U.S. 5th Armored's hit and haul, Pershing's probing, then peeling, forced sallies that scorched reserves. At the Hyrcan Forest's edge, October 4, a 5 or 7th counterattack faltered not on foxholes but fumes. Advanced 10 kilometers to contact, tanks dry at objective. American tactics: jab, retreat, repeat. We chase shadows, they own the sun. Losses: 4 heavies to abandonment. Battalion adjutant log. The forest's mud, deeper than Normandy's kiss, claimed the interleaved curse. Wheels nested with leaves and loam, bogies frozen in disassembly limbo. GIs, bazooka-armed, circled like wolves. Let 'em stew, a sergeant quipped. By dawn, they're ours. Captured in dawn raids, crews confessed, the Tiger fights alone now. Supply lines severed, fuel a fairy tale. Winter's Wolf arrived with the Ardennes offensive. Walked 'em Rhine. Hitler's holiday horror, December 16, 1944. The Stop-Zeep 501, refitted with Porsche turrets and fresh paint, spearheaded through the Losheim Gap. 20 Tigers, engines warmed on ersatz blends that knocked like hammers. Initial shock froze the 106th Infantry. Bulge-borne breakthroughs, Tigers brewing M10s at 2 kilometers, their 88s carving corridors through snowdrifts. But the tide, patient as the Meuse, turned on thirst. The Bulge was the myth's nadir. A 50-mile salient fueled by desperation and delusion. Dietrich's 6th Panzer Army committed over 40 Tigers, but logistics laughed last. Railheads iced, tankers frozen, routes mined by engineer saboteurs. Feints by the 99th Battle Babies, green but gospel-wise, drew sallies that bled the beasts. A 3 kilometers evasion burning 150 liters, stranding panzers in villages like St. Vith. Bastogne siege, that epic stand, owed less to McAuliffe's nuts than to the Tigers' immobility. 501st logs pleading for Treibstoff or halt. Patton's relief column, December 26th, exploited the exhaustion. CCB of the 4th Armored, Abrams leading, danced the doctrine to deadly effect. At Chaumont, a Tiger ambush, 4 hulls in defilade, met not charge, but carousel. M4s circling, 76mm grazing, forcing counter-thrusts that guttered mid-lunge. Abrams radio, crackling triumph. Abrams, laughing through static. Cat's got 9 lives? Nah, 9 gallons. Watch 'em run and stop. Flankers, close the net. By New Year's, the salient sagged. 15 Tigers abandoned, engines seized from cold starts on low-octane swill. A Belgian villager guiding Yanks to a lager. Les Grands Chats, they came roaring, then whispering. Left them for you, like unwanted guests. Interrogated crews, frostbitten, forlorn. We knew the curse in Russia, but here, the Amish make us chase our tails till we drop. The Ardennes epitaph echoed across fronts. Remagen's bridgehead, where Tigers of the 507th arrived too late, engines starved on the march from Bonn. The Rhine crossings, March 45, saw the last loggers. 506th Hulks on the east bank, scuttled not by fire but futility. Soviet pushes on the Oder mirrored the madness. T-34 swarms baiting pursuits that petered in Polish plains. IS-85s overrunning the stalled. Zhukov's tallies, enemy heavies, 60% losses to logistics. Aberdeen's shadow lengthens. By VE's whisper, the roads of Europe from Carentan to the Caucasus bore witness. Muddy verges lined with empty tanks, their silence louder than any salvo. The myth that Teutonic terror expired not in cataclysm, but collapse. a cascade of confessions from the cockpits. We built gods. The gods wanted too much. Allied columns rolled past, unmolested, their crews toasting with captured schnapps, to the Tiger, felled by its footprint. The tide had turned, inexorable as Elbe's flow, from fear's fog to clarity's charge. The Tiger, once the war's dark star, became its cautionary constellation, a warning that even thunder bows to the wind of want. Power means nothing when it can't reach the battle. May 8, 1945. VE Day's ink was barely dry on the surrender scrawls when the real interrogations began. Not of generals in gilded cuffs, but of the quiet men who dreamed in differentials and alloys. The engineers of the Tiger, those Henschel and Krupp savants whose slide rules scripted the war's most fearsome phantom. In the rubble of the Ruhr, amid the skeletal skeletons of assembly lines that birthed over 1,300 Tigers, Allied intelligence peeled back the final layer of legend. No tanks thundered here, only truths tumbled. Confessions of warnings whistled into winds of will, flawed formulas forged in the fire of Führer fever, and an arrogance alloyed in steel that cost a continent its soul. This was the post-war purge of pretense. Dust-moted sessions where pride cracked like cooling welds, revealing the fractures beneath. The Tiger wasn't slain on battlefields or in labs. It was autopsied in these tents, its designers dissecting their own creation. Not with calipers, but candor. Ignored memos from 41, assumptions of Aryan exceptionalism that blinded to logistics lash, and a national delusion that quality trumped quantity. These were the true torpedoes that torched the Panzer dream. In the Confessions chorus, the myth's architects admitted the heresy. Their masterpiece was madness, a monument to momentum unchecked. And in that admission, the war's cruel calculus closed. Arrogance paid not in gold, but in graves and ghosts. Erwin Aders was the Tiger's midwife, chief engineer at Henschel's Kassel plant, where prototypes clawed from drawing boards to dirt tracks in 42. Captured in his firm's vault amid half-finished hulls and schematics singed by RAV phosphorus, he faced Whittaker not as foe, but fellow craftsman. The Tiger, Aders began, voice steady as he traced a phantom blueprint on the table, was born of necessity. Barbarossa's butcher bill, T-34s tearing our panzers like paper. Hitler demanded unzerstörbar, indestructible. Porsche's elephants lumbered too slow, our design won the spec. But from the cradle, we knew the curse. Aders' confession unspooled like a jammed tape. Early trials in 41, at the Deutsche Erprobungsanstalt in Kummersdorf. Rough country mocking the interleaved wheels. 72 road wheels per side, a marvel for distributing 57 tons, but prone to mud's malice. We clocked 4 hours to clean one bogey. In Russia, weeks. I warned in Memo 47A, Schwerer Panzer, tactical triumph, logistical tragedy. Fuel, prototypes guzzled 1.2 liters per kilometer on flats, off-road, double. But Berlin, genial, proceed. Whittaker leaned in, the lamp etching canyons on his face. The Maybach, aviation heart in a land beast. Why not a diesel, like the Russians? Aders' laugh was hollow, smoke-wreathed. Diesel? Too plebeian for the Wunderwaffe. The HL-210, 700 PS V12 purity, but aviation avgas, scarce as snow in Sahara, we diluted with synthetic Knox City. Memo 62B, fuel consumption 500 liters for 80 kilometers maneuver, unsustainable for Abteilung. Spear initialed ignore, quantity later, quality now. The arrogance thread wove deeper. Assumptions of blitzkrieg eternity, where panzers punched corridors and supply flowed like the Rhine. We modeled on France 40, Aders confessed. Short sprints captured stocks, but Stalingrad, Tunisia, endless fronts, endless thirst. The 88mm KWK-36, Rheinmetall's Jewel, 150mm penetration at 1 km, but each shell 10 kilograms, rack weight crippling mobility. We begged for lighter composites. Krupp said steel is strength. Flawed math. Armor 100mm frontal, sloped to 120mm effective, but weight ballooned from 50 to 57 tons mid-design, straining every seam. The sessions stretched into nights, translators bridging not just tongues but timelines. At the Henschel drawing rooms, now Schaef billet, a cadre of junior engineers spilled under softer lights. Hans Becker, wheel wizard. Greta Miller, the rare woman in the draftsman's den, optics specialist. Captured en masse, they faced a panel. U.S. Ordnance, British Reim, French Deuxième Bureau. Becker, hands trembling on a coffee mug, unreeled the wheel woe. Interleaved, inspired by half-tracks in Poland 39, traction triumph. But 72 wheels? Maintenance manual. 200 pages. In field, mechanics wept. Trial at Fallingbostel, 1 hour jam, 4 to fix. Memo chain, 5 ignored. Complexity is capability, they said. Cost, 250 man-hours per overhaul. In war, impossible. Miller's voice, steady as her periscope mounts, cut the chill. The Zeiss sights, TZF-9B, stereoscopic clarity at 3 kilometers. But cupola slits, sniper bait. I proposed armored glass, rejected for weight penalty. Cruise invincible, enemies blind. By 43, reports from Africa, dust blinds optics. Too late, production locked. Her eyes, behind wire rims, flicker to a window. Ruins where her drafting table once stood. We drew dreams, she thinks, and drowned in them. The heart of the hubris beat in the high commands. OKW's willful blindness, Speer's armaments ministry chasing quotas over quality. Interrogators unearthed the paper trail, carbon ghosts from the Reichsarchiv vaults, smuggled west by fleeing clerks. Memo 112D from Porsche to Hitler, June 41. Heavy tank, fuel veracity 1,000 liters per 100 kilometers column. Recommend Panther focus. Reply, Tiger or bust. Adders, reading aloud in the tent, voice cracking. We knew. Trials showed transmission failures at 1,000 kilometers. ZF gearbox shearing under torque. Upgrades, too costly. Arrogance, German steel bends for no one. Paid in steel, over 1,000 Tigers scrapped for parts, not bullets. Von Senger's Maybach mea culpa deepened the cut. The engine, finicky as a prima donna. Twin magnetos for redundancy, but wiring labyrinth. Desert heat, vapor lock inevitable. I lobbied for diesel injection, man's forte. Untermenschlich, they sneered. Flaw, assumed endless avgas from Ploesti. When bombed, synthetics at 80 octane, pistons scored like nails on chalk. His model piston, spun idly, clatters to a stop. Silence mirroring the Maybach's final coughs in Tunis groves. Whitaker recaptured one intact, starved, not shot. Von Senger's eyes drop. Yeah. Our children, abandoned. French interrogators at the Sigmaringen exile holdout grilled the outliers, designers who'd dissented only to be sidelined. Dr. Otto Merker, man diesel advocate, now in threadbare tweed. The Tiger overkill from inception, 57 tons for a breakthrough tank. In 40 we had P4 at 25, nimble, diesel thrifty. But Guderian pushed heavy after Dunkirk myths. Warnings, mobility multiplier, not mass, ignored. Assumptions, war short, resources infinite. By 43, rail gauges strained, Tigers dismantled for transport. Arrogance, we conquer logistics. Merker's laugh bitter, conquered by it. The confessions converged on the human cost, not just steel wasted, but souls squandered. Becker, sketching a bogey on napkin, each wheel jam, a crew exposed, jabos circling like vultures. In Normandy, days lost to digs, while allies advanced. My memos, 20, buried. Miller's addendum, voice soft, crew comfort, an afterthought. 5 men in a sweatbox, ventilation baffles undersized, heat stroke reports from Africa, dozens. Endure, Berlin said, for the Volk. Flawed empathy, engineers as cogs in the Führer's wheel, their doubts drowned in directives. By June, the transcripts tallied a tapestry of tragedy. Over 50 engineers debriefed, from Daimler-Benz turretsmiths to Rheinmetall gun gurus. Common chorus, ignored innovation, sloped armor like the T-34, dismissed as Slavic slant, hybrid drives, vetoed for purity. Assumptions of supremacy, German tolerances, microns finer than foes. But Aberdeen's autopsy echoed back, finer but fragile. Arrogance's apex, Hitler's personal meddling, mid-43, demanding Henkel turrets for all, bloating production, ballooning weight. Speer's reply, unearthed, Führer, resources rerouted, at cost of 200 units monthly. Proceed, the gloss. Ader's capstone in a final session under linden trees at the IG Farben trial grounds. The Tiger won battles, Arras, Kursk flashes, but wars, no, we built for glory, not grind. Flaws, not in steel but sight, blind to the war's length. Warnings, whistled down mineshafts of mania. Now, the mineshafts caved. Whitaker closes the notebook, your truth, our teacher. Aders nods, cigarette ash falling like final full stops. Too late for the dead, he thinks, but not the doing. The confessions rippled outward, to the London Armaments Design Bureau, where Miller consulted on chieftain precursors. Learn our lesson, balance the beast. To Detroit, where Whitaker lectured on enemy errors. Nuremberg indicted the enablers, engineers not hanged but humbled. Aders to denazification classes, von Senger to rebuild Maybachs for tractors. Their words, bound in declassified tomes, became the Tiger's true epitaph, a caution carved in captured candor. The truth came too late. But it came. 80 years after the guns fell silent and the groves of Tunisia reclaimed their peace, the tiger endures, not as a roaring terror on forgotten fronts, but as a silent sage in the sunlight of scrutiny. Fort Moore, Georgia, once Camp Benning, cradle of the infantry's unyielding grit, cradles Tiger 712 in its U.S. Army armor and cavalry collection. Here, amid the echoes of bayonet drills and the ghosts of ranger runs, the beast that once bent Allied spines now bends minds. A monument to misunderstood power, its armor cut open not in battle's fury, but curiosity's calm incision. This is no museum curio gathering dust in dim halls. It is a classroom on tracks, where cadets and civilians alike peer into its exposed belly. Fuel tanks that thirsted for empires, engines that strained against their own splendor, and a design that dared the world to dream too big. In the war's white heat, the Tiger was myth incarnate, a psychological colossus that crushed morale before it crushed tanks. But truth, that patient predator, has claimed its trophy. From Aberdeen's anvil to the Ardennes anvil, from engineers' confessions to the cockpit's candid regrets, the legend has been laundered into legacy. Today, in an age of drones and data streams, 712 teaches what the 40s learned in blood. Power untethered from practicality is but a beautiful blunder, a symphony silenced by its own crescendo. And in its quiet dignity, the Tiger whispers a moral as timeless as the tracks it scarred into history's soil. Humility in the face of hubris, understanding over illusion. Tiger 712's journey to this Georgia glen was no straight shot from Tunisian triumph. Shipped stateside in 43, vivisected at Aberdeen in 44, it rolled through the war as a rolling Rosetta Stone. Data distilled into doctrine that danced the tigers to dust. Post-VE, it lingered in Maryland's Proving Grounds, a test bed for Cold War curios. Compared to Pershing's, then Patton's, its flaws a foil for American pragmatism. By the 50s, as Korea's hills echoed with centurions, 7 and 12 was crated, turret off, tracks wrapped, and shuttled south to Fort Benning's vaults, a classified relic amid the chug of M48s on the ranges. Decades slumbered in storage sheds, rust fended by cosmoline and care. Then in the 90s, as the Gulf's sands stirred old specters, it emerged for restoration. Henschel blueprints scrounged from declassified archives, guiding welders to mend what time had nipped. The side cut? No accident. A deliberate door to demystify, installed in 98 at the Armor School's behest. Let the cadets see inside, Colonel Elias Crow, Whitaker's protege now curator, decreed. Not the myth, the mechanics. Unveiled in 2000, amid Fort Moore's millennial pomp, 712 drew crowds, Vietnam vets nodding at the fuel bay, knew it from the docks, and school groups sketching the 88's breach, teachers tying it to thermodynamics bite. Today it anchors the collection, one of 3 surviving intact tigers worldwide, kin to the Bovington behemoth and Kubinka's captured kin. But 712's uniqueness lies in its openness. That gash, framed by interpretive panels, invites touch. Fingers on the ZF gearbox that sheared under strain, eyes on the 534-liter main tank that starved so many siblings. Interactive kiosks hum nearby. Touchscreens replay Aberdeen reels, grainy 43 footage of first revs, fuel curves graphing the folly. A virtual tour, voiced by a descendant of Lila Hargrove. Feel the weight, 57 tons of what if. The reflections ripple beyond the ramparts. In academic halls, West Point's Thayer Hall, Sandhurst's lecture theaters, 712 story syllabus's strategy, case study, the Tiger paradox, hubris versus humility, overmatch versus overreach. Professors parse Jarrett's reports like scripture, cross-referencing with von Senger's confessions. Engineering under edict, brilliance bent by bias. Students debate in seminars, was the Tiger a tactical triumph or strategic sin? Answers evolve, from binary blame to nuanced nod. Both, a mirror to our own machines, Abrams in Iraq, Leclerc's in the Sahel, where tech tempts but logistics lords. Pop culture claims its cut. Video games like World of Tanks immortalize the beast. 712's serial etched in virtual hulls, players cursing its fuel sims. One flank and I'm dry. Documentaries, heirs to Felton's forensic flair revisit the reveal. Yarnhub's animated Aberdeen, Dark Doc's diary dives. Bookshelves sag under tomes. Tiger. The Hidden Truth by Whitaker's grandson blending blueprints with battlefield ballads. Even fiction nods. Tom Clancy's heirs pen Panzer what-ifs, where a fuel-savvy Sherman dances a tiger to doom. But the deepest echoes sound in personal pilgrimages. Veterans' reunions at more draw the dwindled. 90-somethings in faded Ike jackets, hands arthritic but eyes alight, touching the tracks that once tracked their nightmares. 1. Sergeant Tom Riley, the carpet captor, now 98, returns yearly. First time I saw her kin, I shook. Now, she's family, the uncle who taught hard lessons. His tales, taped for the museum's oral archive, weave war's warp. Fear faded when we knew the thirst. Truth, best bazooka we had. Grandkids listen, iPads forgotten, absorbing the alchemy, from curse to classroom. Global guardians honor the ghost. At the Tank Museum in Bovington, Tiger 131, the 43V variant, first running captive, parallels 712. Side by side in spirit, one rolling demos on summer Sundays, the other static sentinel. Russian Kubinka, now Patriot Park, hoards its 131 kin, a Cold War trophy thawed for tours. Conferences convene, heavy tanks, hubris or heritage, in Kassel, where Henschel's heirs host Ader's descendants unveiling family memos. Father warned, beauty burdens. Attendees, from Israeli Merkava makers to Chinese Type 99 teams, nod. Our lesson to balance the beast. Environmental echoes stir irony anew. In an era of electric hum and hybrid hush, the tiger's thirst preaches prudence. Climate confabs cite it, Woatu's fuel follies panels at COP summits, graphing gallons to graves. The tiger didn't just lose wars, a TEDx talk quips, it lit the fuse for fossil follies. Students in STEM labs model it, 3D prints of interleaved wheels, simulations spitting fuel forecasts, optimize or obsolete. The moral metastasizes, power without planet, illusion doubled, yet reverence reigns over revision. Annual ceremonies at Moore, Tiger Day, blend bugle calls with briefings. Reenactors in Feldgrau and Olive, staging not skirmishes, but the capture. Olive branches snapping, fuel gauge clicking empty. Wreaths laid at the gash, white for the fallen crews, red for the revelation. Jarrett's words, etched on the plaque, anchor the right. The tiger's real enemy was never the Allies, it was its own design. Crow, now retired, recites it yearly, voice gravel from Georgia Clay. Design's double edge, genius engrave. Honor the first, heed the second. Attendees, diverse as the doughboys' ranks reflect, a Syrian refugee studying engineering, my home's ruins, echoes of excess. A drone pilot from Creech AFB, our birds sip data, not diesel. But overreach, same siren. The tiger's tail transcends tanks, a parable for powers presumed. In boardrooms, where execs chase unicorns of overpromise, it's the caution. Don't build the tiger, build the supply. In politics, where strongmen strut stages, it's the reminder. Illusion inflates, truth deflates. Even in the arts, songs sample the Maybach's growl, electronica remixes of Aberdeen revs, lyrics lamenting thirsty thrones. Novels nest it, alternate histories where a diesel tiger turns tides, footnotes nodding, but reality ruled. For the fans who flock to Felton's feeds, Yarn Hub's yarns, the front's forensics, this story sings siren, untold truth behind told tales where machines mirror men. The tiger, that once feared feline of steel, now purrs a profounder purr. Curiosity conquers, knowledge kindles, and humility heals the hurts of haste. In its opened armor, we see not just welds and wheels, but windows to the war's why, the world's what next. 712 stands not as survivor, but teacher. Silent, scarred, but speaking volumes in the vernacular of vulnerability. The desert wind that whispered its capture still stirs the oaks of Moore, a continuum, from myth to monument. The Allies feared it once, whispered its name in the dark. But truth, that unyielding ally, turned terror to tuition. And in the learning we grew greater. Wiser warriors, humbler heirs to history's hard-won hardcovers. They feared it once, but truth made them wiser. If you love stories that uncover the truth behind legends, subscribe for more untold moments of history.